Hello and welcome. My name is Josh Reeve and I'm with PMZ Real Estate, and we're joined with one of the premier lenders in our area and really in the world, Sandra Yates. Sandra, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you so much, you guys. Yep, Sandra Yates here, Team Yates and Cross Country.
Yeah, the thing that we wanted to kind of sit down with Sandra and talk about today is the idea of affordability, because that is seemingly the greatest issue that our buyers are facing today.
Absolutely.
Would you agree with that?
I would. This interest rate increasing environment combined with prices increasing, not leveling off, definitely not going downwards as some have maybe indicated, have really put our buyers in a little bit of a challenging environment.
Yes, it has. And so one of the things that I've heard tossed around is the idea of assuming loans. And so one of the things that I wanted you to speak to today is, how does somebody, a buyer, assume somebody's loan? Because maybe somebody's sitting there with a 3% loan on their house and a buyer coming in would be buying with a much higher rate, which would make it unaffordable. So how does a buyer assume a current loan on somebody's house?
That is a great question. So the first part is, what does an assumption mean? That means that maybe a seller is selling a house and has, like Josh explained, a lower rate than a current market rate. Now, if that loan type is VA, FHA, and most conventional adjustable loans, it's assumable.
Okay.
So that means that if I'm buying that house, I would work with that seller and their current servicer, the one they make their mortgage payments to see if I can qualify to take over that payment. So there is the challenge of, in that scenario, having to fill in the gap. Maybe the seller has a loan for $300, but they want to sell it for $400.
Sure.
Then we would work to help them fill in that gap with secondary financing, meaning like perhaps a second mortgage. And although that mortgage is going to be a higher rate, it's a much smaller portion of their loan.
Right.
So the buyer still benefits from having most of their mortgage payment be based on that lower interest rate. It's a great alternative.
When you say a higher rate, is it higher than a normal purchase of a home rate would be? Or is it the same as if I were just to go out and buy a house, that would be the mortgage rate, so it's higher? Or is it even higher than that because it's a second?
Yep, it's slightly higher than that because it's a second. So just in general, seconds run about 1.5 points or so higher. But again, we're talking about a much smaller loan balance, so that payment impact is much more doable for most clients in terms of the payment.
In this environment, is it hard for a buyer to assume a loan?
You know, it completely varies based on the lender, because the lender has to approve the assumption. So if you happen to have a property, or maybe you're considering selling yourself and your rate is low, first thing is to work with a trusted professional. Give Josh a call so we can figure out what kind of loan you have and how best to not only market your property as a seller, but then circle back with our buyers and find them the best programs with those lower monthly payments, so we can make sure that it's a win-win for everybody.
That's great. Now, you said it really quick as you opened. What types of loans are assumable?
Yep, absolutely. So in general, all FHA loans, VA loans, and conventional adjustable rate mortgages. So if you have a conventional loan that's fixed, it probably is not assumable, but we can always double check that for you. You and title reps, and we have access to obtain this information. And again, why it's super important to work with a team. We're a team.
Correct.
Yep, that's my answer.
So we're here with Sandra Yates. We're talking about a very specific type of environment where maybe a buyer is looking at assuming a seller's loan. So the question I have is, how do you find loans that are assumable, meaning they're FHA, VA, or a conventional adjustable home loan on a seller's property? How do you find that?
Absolutely. So again, that all goes back to the importance of working with a full team. So the right lender, the right realtor, and a great escrow team can help us really find and narrow down those properties and do all of that research for you, that we are going after those specific properties that may fit that criteria for you.
Yes, that's great.
Yep.
I do want to throw in that for some listings, the agent or the listing agent will sometimes indicate the type of loan that the seller has. And so that can give us an indication of the type of financing or the possibility of assuming the loan.
Yep, that's exactly correct. And so that has really become more common as we all try to work together to really get those mortgage payments down for you. We know that so many of you have that desire of home ownership, and the challenging market has maybe put you on the sidelines or paused it a little bit. But together we can absolutely work on finding some alternatives so we can get that affordability under control for you and your family, and you can realize that dream of home ownership.
Great way to get you off of the sidelines
Yep.
and into the game.
That's right.
So Sandra, would you tell me, I've heard a little bit about a buy down.
Yes.
And getting a buy down and getting your financing. Can you tell us a little bit about what that means and how a buy down could work?
Absolutely, absolutely. So we are always working together to find you that best program to get that payment as comfortable within your budget as you are looking for. So for example, the most common buy down is called a 2-1 buy down. In that scenario, let's just say with your loan type today that your rate is 7%. That means for the mortgage payment in year one, the rate is bought down to 5%.
Wow.
In year two, it's
That's a lot.
6%. It's huge, absolutely. And then in year 3 through 30 on a standard loan, it's still fixed at that 7%. So a couple of things. It's important to know that at no time is that rate adjustable. It's always fixed.
It's always fixed.
Always fixed. It just happens to be that we are buying it down for a specific period of time, with the ultimate goal of most housing professionals would say that we should have some rate relief in the next 12 to 18 months.
Right.
Yep.
Sure.
So if we can then refinance that rate into something lower long term, any of that money in the buy down account unused actually goes back to your principal balance, meaning you owe less on the mortgage, therefore even adjusting that payment down even more.
Okay, so this is great. So we go from a 7% in this scenario in the first year to a 5% for those first 12 months.
Yep.
And who pays for this? Because this is a huge deal.
Huge deal, huge deal. So I know as a buyer, often we really want a deal, right? We see a list price
Yes, we do.
and I want to offer less on that property. But two things to consider. One, property values are stable and still increasing in most areas. Two, instead of requesting a price reduction, for example, $70 for every $10,000 or so in this rate environment doesn't get you very far on your payment. But instead, if you ask that seller for a $10,000 credit towards a buy down, depending on your loan amount, that first year you could be looking at a payment of $700 less per month.
Wow.
So it's really important to strategize how to best make those offers so we can really get you what you ultimately want, which is that home at an affordable payment.
Right. Now, as far as qualifying, do you have to be able to qualify for the full 7% loan when you're qualifying for a loan?
Yep, that's a great question too. You do, because the lender is required to show that you can make that higher mortgage payment in those time periods where we're essentially subsidizing and filling in that gap.
Right.
So we definitely want to make sure that we are not looking at a home that's beyond your reach, even at the higher rate. But with all intents and purposes, rates eventually will come down and we'll be able to get that payment lower. But it still is always ultimately going to be important that we work with your budget.
Well, thank you so much for your time, Sandra, and sharing all this valuable information with us about affordability and how we can make things work for us, even in this environment that we're in today. I really appreciate your time. Thanks so much.
For sure. Thank you guys so much. Have a great day.